All right, so today I want to talk to you about dealing with an aging narcissist parent, and this is a popular topic on my channel, and I have devised a system or a method and an approach to dealing with this. So my wife and I came up with this approach, and it's essentially a way to insulate ourselves, our emotions, our own well-being, and our children's, because we're in a situation where we're sharing the same property with my parents, and we're ultimately participating in the care and the retirement and the old age of my parents. My parents, my mom is a aging narcissist in collapse, and my dad is an aging enabler in collapse. So it's an interesting dynamic, and it's certainly challenging navigating that. So the system that we've developed, my wife coined the phrase the monster method. And the monster method has several components and parts, and I'll break these down for you so you can understand them and hopefully be able to use it in the situation you're in. Because if you are a millennial or a Gen Xer, most likely you have a baby boomer parent who is a raging narcissist, and you have to deal with them. So the goal is to protect ourselves and be able to move on with our lives and not get sucked into their dramatic, demented reality. Okay, so the biggest things to keep in mind are awareness. We need to be fully cognitively aware of the situation that we're in and the state that our parents are in, especially the narcissists, because they're going to be the most trouble to deal with. And really, that awareness starts with educating yourself. If you're not already aware and you suspect that something's happening, something that's not right, you can begin exploring the topic of narcissism. And there are a ton of resources on this. I have a lot of videos on my website, on my YouTube channel, and there's a ton of knowledge and information out there. So I highly encourage you to, think of, you want the truth. Like, what's really happening here? I'm trying to get to the bottom of this. I want the truth. So start learning and becoming familiar with the behavior, because the weakness of these people is their patterns. And the narcissist, once they figure out one thing that works, they just run that pattern, that same game over and over again. And if you can begin to become aware, and a good way to do that is you kind of have to take this, you have to become highly observant, and you have to be objective in your skills of observation. And by being objective, you have to kind of detach from your emotions. And I know that's hard to do, but that's how you can get the most benefit from observing the behavior, using your knowledge and insight, and studying to become familiar with the patterns and what it means, and then ultimately being able to objectively criticize and analyze what you're observing. Because the patterns, those are the big things, and that's a big part of the monster method, is we have to find the patterns. So the other part of the monster method is it's going to be predicting this behavior and predicting these patterns. And I have several videos that I made about predicting narcissist behavior. And it starts with the awareness and becoming familiar with the behavior and what it means. And then it starts from an objective observational point of view, where you can observe the recurring patterns. You can start to see the patterns, and you can begin predicting the storm, because it's very cyclical with these people, and inevitably there's going to be a big dramatic occurrence that will be building. And so the idea is to get ahead of that and be able to mitigate that so it causes the least amount of damage to you and your family. Another really important thing is to reflect on the past and what has happened to you, from years back. Be able to analyze that, take that objective standpoint, and draw upon that wealth of information and knowledge, because that will help you see the patterns in the individual, because all these people are slightly different, even though they do exhibit, pretty much the same characteristics and traits, but everyone's going to be slightly different. And so you can reflect on your past and draw from that wealth of knowledge and use that to help predict the behavior. So another key component, which is, I think, a big part of what's kind of wrong with a lot of the diagnosis of the concept of narcissism and narcissistic behavior, and it's in the labeling. And I feel like the term narcissist, it's too ambiguous, and it doesn't provide a clear, concise definition of who these people really are. And that's what I like about the monster method, is these people are monsters. They are bad people doing bad things, and they're wreaking havoc and destabilizing innocent people's lives throughout society. I mean, that's the truth. And to call these people narcissists, it's kind of like, oh, well, they're just a narcissist, and they can't help it, just a narcissist, whatever. In all actuality, no, these people are monsters. And the nice thing about this label of the monster method is it becomes a safe word for you. Because what happens to me, after 40 years of experiencing this person's, psychological bombardment, manipulation, and this spell, it's like, man, she knows all the right buttons to press when I'm in her vicinity. Even if I can see her or hear her or smell her or whatever, it's like she can trigger me, man, instantly. And I'm so indoctrinated, and these trigger points are so strong that it just happens instantly. So for me, it's nice to have a safe word like monster, because it'll help snap you out of those trigger points and that spell, because that's a strong word. That word has strong meaning and strong connotations. You can't mistake the word monster. So that's really important, and I think a key element of this system or this method is to really call it for what it is. And these people are monsters, and we need to be completely cognitively aware of that. So, we've gone over the awareness, we're getting to the truth. We need to study, learn, develop insight. Through that, we then begin to be able to predict the narcissist behavior, and we be able to kind of, get ahead of what they're cooking and brewing. And then, in turn, we can have the safe word of monster, where, it can help trigger us to get us out of the spell. Because the likelihood of you interacting with these people are high. And unless you're no contact, congratulations and enjoy your life. And I hope you can. We're going to have to deal with these people, whether it's daily or weekly or monthly. And so keeping that monster term in mind will help us in these daily interactions, or however common they are. So the other thing, and it's kind of overlooked, and my wife really kind of brought this to my attention, and it has to do with the concept of love language. I never really was familiar with it, but it's how people demonstrate love and affection to one another. And, people do that differently. And so, like, for example, for my wife and I, we're very vocal about our affection and our love. We constantly say, I love you. Oh, I love you. And with the kids, we're always expressing our emotions and love verbally. And then, we do that physically as well, by hugging one another and, holding hands and stuff like that. But what's interesting about my folks is, whatever love these kind of people have, it's purely in the material realm. So their whole thing is they need objects and gifts and things like that. And that may be true with all of these kinds of shallow people, because these monsters, they're obviously on a lower level, which is that material realm, and they have no empathy. So I don't know if they can ever truly love without it being distorted, or so like their whole thing, my parents' whole thing is like they need items and gifts and how many presents did I get for Christmas, and what did they give me? So that's another big part of the monster method, is giving them little chi crap. And it actually goes a long way. My mom, she likes all that little chi old lady crap, you like put on the side of the house, or like a little, thing to put in the yard, or like a bird feeder, or whatever, bullshit is going to keep this person at bay. So, my wife is God bless her. She's always going out of her way to find these little chi crap for my mom. But it does help. And they need these physical objects to feel like they're receiving love from us. Because a big thing, and this happened last year, is, and we weren't ready for it because we weren't, we weren't tuned in to this system, this monster method that we've been working on. But this helped pave the way to it. We had left for vacation and came back, and it was like this whole shitstorm of like, when you guys need to leave and get away from us, and you don't love your mother enough, and there's this whole thing, and like, oh, we need to have a bunch of talks, and you're killing us, and it was this big dust up and drama, which ultimately resulted in nothing. And all my wife did was just bake cookies and I think she bought my mom a birdhouse. And that completely pacified the whole situation. And it goes to show, like, these people's words mean nothing. Because, yeah, if it was a dire situation and we're literally killing you guys, and it's so terrible that we're living on your property with our, your grandchildren and, my lovely wife. And I'm super helpful. It's not like I'm just wreaking havoc every day, completely the opposite. Then yeah, that would be warranted, and we could sit down and have a discussion about that, like what normal people do. But it was all fiction, and this made up in the delusional story that these monsters create out of nothing. And so, first we're like, oh man, this is really serious. We got to get to the bottom of this. But no, some baked goods and a birdhouse, and it was all smoothed over. So in your situation, if, your narcissistic parent is similar to how mine is, consider that. Just, go to Costco and buy like 1,000 of those shitty muffins, and just give one of those muffins, every couple days, wrapped up with like a little card with a bird, put a bird on it. There you go. That's next level. Anyway, it's like this whole thing came to light. It was like necessity. It's like it's necessary for our survival, and that is the parent in the birth of innovation and inventions, is like out of necessity. So, you can figure out your own program too, because that's what we have to do. Is like, we really have to take control of our situations that we're in, because problems and challenging situations will continually arise throughout life. And obviously, if we're in this monster narcissist situation, it's really challenging and it's a tough problem to solve. But I like the term, it's everyday people solving everyday problems. And judging by the popularity of the videos that I've made on this topic, I think it's affecting a lot of people, because the baby boomers are the largest generation in modern history. So just by default metrics, there's going to be a higher concentration of narcissistic monsters in that generation. So the burden ultimately falls onto the Gen Xers and the millennials. And it's our responsibility to rise to the occasion, even though we may not want to, and figure out how we can keep ourselves safe and protect our own emotions and our own well-being, and also our children. Because in my case, implementing this kind of like gray rocking with the narcissist, she's now lashing out to try to get supply from the grandchildren, which is detrimental on them, it's another form of abuse, and we want to limit that as much as possible, which, we are. And speaking of the gray rocking, and that's another thing to learn about in research, and that's another kind of generic terminology that's, how you can relate to these difficult people, with kind of keeping everything really vague and ambiguous, and trying to be like non-attached emotionally to these people. So the monster method, we're onto something here. It's ever evolving. So my situation is it's literally daily, but I'm really in that objective observation role, and every day it's just more data and information, and so I'm building all this up, and I'm able to reflect on it and learn from it, and add to the this pool, this bank of information and knowledge that we can all share. So consider the monster method. It's working for us, and we have a big annual trip coming up, and I'll make a video about this tomorrow, but it always results in a big emotional event for the monsters. So we are preparing, and we are working diligently to get ahead of it, to make it okay for us just to live, be free and live our lives. Anyway, yeah, it never ends with these people. Anyway, I hope you're doing well, and I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.